First of all, looking at the minutes of the last meeting held on the 7th of June. I'll quickly go through them. Please catch my eye. I'll take corrections and any matters arising at the same time. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4 and 5, page 6. Can I seek approval of those minutes, please, then? Thank you very much. Motion carried. If we can move then to apologies. I think my colleague will read out the apologies for us.
Thank you. Today we've got 2 substitutions. We have Councillor Michael Edwards substituting for Councillor Linda Woodings on behalf of Nottingham City Council, and we've got Councillor John O'Lee substituting for Councillor Scott Carlton of Newark and Sherwood District Council. We've also had apologies from Councillor Nagat Khan of Nottingham City Council and from Suma Harding.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Then moving to item 3 of the agenda, any declarations of interest by members and officers present. First of all, a disclosable pecuniary interests. I don't see anyone raising their hand. And for private interests, pecuniary and non-pecuniary. I think that's a nil return as well. Thank you. That takes us to item 4 on the agenda, the work programme. If I could hand over to my colleague, Jo Toomey, she'll take us through this paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Today's work programme report covers a number of issues. Firstly, you've got the committee's, the panel's usual work programme, which obviously if you'd like to suggest any items to bring forward, you're more than welcome to as part of your discussions today. We're highlighting on there the National Police, Fire and Crime Panel Conference. If members of the panel are interested in attending that conference, which is being held in person this year on Monday the 1st and Tuesday the 2nd of November, please can you let me know as soon as possible and we can arrange for you to be booked onto that, and confirming whether you are looking at the 1 day or the 2 days. We're highlighting in the report where the Home Office review of the Police and Crime Commissioners is currently. It notes that phase 1 is completed and actions are being implemented. Phase 2 is now underway, and the intention is for that currently to be reporting later this year. Whether it'll be in time for our next panel meeting, we'll have to wait and see, so we'll keep that under review and bring you updates when they're available. And finally, within the work programme report, we also refer to 2 site visits. The first is a site visit towards the end of this month that members have been invited to the new custody suite at Radford Road. We'll also be working with colleagues in the office of the PCC to arrange for you all to visit the new joint headquarters building once completion is more near. So we'll follow up with you about that nearer the time.
Thank you very much. The recommendations are that the work programme be updated as appropriate. And as Jo has said, please let us know if anyone's interested in attending the 10th conference. Thank you, colleagues, for arranging the imminent visit to the new custody suite. I do hope for all of us it's the only time we need to visit it. We're looking forward to seeing it, having seen the old version, but it's not somewhere we particularly want to visit outside of this forum. But thank you very much for hosting it for us, and we look forward to seeing that. That takes us to item 5. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yes, I didn't do that. I didn't do the recommendations need formally to be put to the committee. My apologies. Are all those in favour? Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that, Jo. That takes us to item 5, page 15 to 20 in your bundle. And some of you will recall this has been going on for a few months now. And first of all, I'd like to thank our colleagues in Her Majesty's Court Services for the production of this up-to-date report. For those of you who've perhaps not been to this forum for a while, the history of this goes back some months. we're in our role to support the Commissioner in challenges that may be outside his or her sphere of influence and called upon to assist. And that's how we started down this road, to see if we could help get Nottinghamshire, particularly, and Nightingale Court was the prime aim. Other things came to light, and as you'll see in the report, there are a number of things that have been highlighted. But I think it would be appropriate at this point to perhaps address this to the Commissioner, because this was something that was really for the Commissioner's benefit, if I can use that phrase, in supporting the Commissioner. And hopefully this has gone some way to alleviating a number of issues. So perhaps, Commissioner, you'd like to take the floor on this.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd also like to thank Her Majesty's CTS for providing this briefing note. And I'm really pleased to see this is an encouraging direction of travel, but there's still clearly much to do. As Commissioner, one of my main priorities is to reduce the impact of court delays and adjournments, because that's what impact that's having on victim and witness engagement and attrition to CJS. The increase in magistrates' court capacity since April 21 and the introduction of the Nightingale Court at Mercure Nottinghamshire Hotel since March, and there's also got a trail blitz planned for November, are actually helping to tackle the court backlog, which we know was such an issue even prior to the pandemic. And I'm particularly pleased to see an increase in police-led prosecution listings, something I'm really keen to see an increase further over the coming year. I do appreciate that the panel has had difficulty in securing attendance at the meeting from HMCATS, but I understand that we've now got a new regional head of crime in post who wrote this report, Hugh Skimkiss, and we've been working hard to develop stronger relationships with the court and other CJ partners, particularly actually over the last month. Just last week, I met the Chair of Magistrates Bench, Cheryl Lacey, and HMCTS Senior Legal Manager for Crime, Simon Kent. We had a really productive meeting, exploring the opportunities for me to help drive improvements in the criminal justice outcomes as part of my police and crime plan. I want to help obtain early guilty pleas and swifter justice. Some of the areas that I want to explore include driving further improvements to case file quality, helping ensure that we have best use of CTV and body-worn video at first hearing. We also need to look how we make best use of cloud video platform. Everyone calls that CVP. If you hear about CVP, that's what it is. I didn't know till recently. But that you can overcome challenges of attending court in person. Now, CVP was used really effectively during COVID, and it's actually, we can have some learnings and we could still use it. One of the things that I'd like to do as part of my plan is establish a local criminal justice assurance board that will help me and you to gain a better understanding of our local issues, challenges and performance. I'm also looking for opportunities to get involved with local multi-agency court observation sessions to help develop a better understanding of areas of improvement. And I'll be outlining these proposals in my police and crime plan after consulting more widely with local CJ partners.
Thank you, Commissioner. As you'll expect, there are some supplemental questions that are going to come to possibly yourself to begin with. And in our prior discussion, we've said that if there's anything that can't be answered today, we will formulate those into a question we'll send back to Mr. Simkis and say these still remain outstanding questions that the panel would like to have a view on. But perhaps we're more hopeful of not having too many of those today.
Thank you very much for your support here, Chair. It is appreciated.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis, I think, wants to start.
Thank you, Chair. I think much of what I had to say has already been answered. I mean, looking through the papers, on page 25 in the Commissioner's reports, there's talk about the initial needs assessment and ongoing pressures on the court system. And on page 55 on the 90-day plan, the Commissioner identifies this as a critical area of concern. And certainly the anecdotal evidence we get from people is that it's still an issue whether it's the family courts or delays in the criminal courts. And we've said before at these meetings that justice delayed is justice denied. Yeah. And we have got the Justice Inspectorate who agree with us. So in that context, I find this report disappointing. It's a bit. Seems that everything's rosy, everything's fine. Yep. So I'm pleased that the Commissioner doesn't agree with that, because it's not the way we see. So I think the Chair's right that at this point we draw a line under it. We've had 3 reports. We've tried to point out that there's a bit of accountability, a bit of being open to the public that the court service doesn't seem to want to know. But I think we've pushed as far as we can at this present point. But we'd be interested to see what you do come up with.
And I will continue to push, I assure you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Councillor Edwards first, and then Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not sure if your microphone was working correctly. I'm not sure. Is it come on, Red?
Yeah, it's not working.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of background noise, and maybe just a quick précis of summing up would be helpful. I'm not sure everyone heard exactly what you said.
I'm sorry about that. I just assumed that a lack of red light didn't mean anything significant. Just to say, a burden of the family court services not getting things done is that children's services are having to provide more and more service. And that service, arguably the levels of service that we're having to provide is increasing at the rate of £1 million a month, give or take. And so the implications of that are all kinds of other council services are having to perform at less levels of establishment than was envisaged. So if people have got influence, if people who can get something done about this and actually get it sorted, please push on, because it is a very, very serious matter for the City Council, and we desperately need these backlogs sorting out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner, do you want to come back, or shall we collect the next question in case it's something that will influence your response?
Thank you. I had a meeting earlier this week with my Police and Crime Commissioner colleagues. It is such a national issue, and we're all pushing. But actually, one of the things we don't have in Nottinghamshire is a Nottinghamshire specific criminal justice board. It's a regional criminal justice board, which is why I want to look at seeing what I can do more for Nottinghamshire.
Thank you. Councillor Camilleri, thank you.
Thank you. I agree with everything that people have said before, but being a simple mind, I don't understand why you're under scrutiny, close scrutiny, and you're being asked questions. Why are you late? What's this? What's that? And the court system, for some unknown reason, is way above that. Because I feel that, and I've said that's the reason they're not here, because they don't want to be asked the questions. And perhaps we have to be a little bit stronger on requesting they're here, because it's costing Nottingham City Council £1 million a month. It must be costing you at your budgets. People are there being under the cosh for a year and a half, victims, you name it. And who do we talk to? How do we scrutinise them? We couldn't all be very pally and get on really well, and he's going to write you that letter. They're going to, but I think we've got to do some pretty quick, because we're going to be in a mess, and we've got to stop this friendly chit chat, and they'll put you off forever. It's got to be a bit more, a bit stronger, perhaps.
It was a bit firmer than
I should imagine it is, Caroline.
A friendly chit chat, Andre.
I know what you like. Yeah.
But also, I think it's interesting in part 2 of the Police and Crime Commissioners review, they are looking about what more powers the Police and Crime Commissioners can have over the and crime bit. I think that, because at the moment I can have conversations, but I can't hold them to account like I'd like to. And also, they're devils to get numbers out of. And I like numbers. I want data. I want to know up-to-date data, not 3 or 6 months out of date. And when we need transparency, like we have transparency with the police.
Thank you. Councillor Helen Smith, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick question for you, Commissioner. You've just mentioned you wanting to set up a Nottinghamshire Criminal Justice Reassurance Board. What would the membership of that be?
Yeah, so it's very much sort of based on best practice sort of nationally, and it would involve senior CJS practitioner across the prosecution, youth justice service, the police, and it would effectively not seek to replicate the work that's being done at a regional level, but provide assurance and provide greater transparency on that, so that we can assure ourselves and you effectively that progress is being made. And in fact, it would also, I guess, be within our gift really to shape the membership of that group. So,
well, that was just my next question, Chair, if you wouldn't mind. Would it be possible for potentially the chairman of this committee, crime panel, to sit on that, bring the reassurance back to our board panel?
I'm always a big believer in not rushing to decide on the hoof. I think wisdom tells me that I'd like to see the terms of reference, the powers, and also understand where it's going to fit in following the review of both the Police and Crime Commissioner's role and the Police and Crime Panel. I think your suggestion, I'm sure, has not gone on deaf ears, but it would be inappropriate to sign ourselves up to we don't know what. And our role is to really step aside from operational issues wherever possible, to look more strategically when we're questioning colleagues. But thank you for that suggestion. Mr. Vaughan Newton, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of information. Until about 10 years ago, there used to be an organisation called the Nottinghamshire Local Criminal Justice Partnership, LCJP, which was chaired by the Chief Constable. So somewhere in a filing cabinet, somewhere at Sherwood Lodge, I imagine there are probably minutes and constitutions and something that might be helpful in perhaps reconstituting that body.
Oh, so go on.
So I'm really open to ideas and following best practice. Lincolnshire are doing well with their local version. We have a regional version, but I'm open to ideas, and we're absolutely going to be pushing forward on something to make sure we can hold the courts more to account.
Thank you. If I may just ask a question on page 18 of the bundle, towards the bottom of that particular paper. Once again, I noticed that there's commentary about file quality. File quality has been on the agenda for us as long as I can remember. This particular one obviously highlights CPS and police. I'm sure the courts are completely blameless in this matter. And I just wondered if you'd got any ideas with yourself and the Chief how that might be improved upon.
Yeah, you're right, Chair. It's a slight humbug type issue. It's really something that we try to work hard on and I know the burden seems to have shifted over the last 12 months. Director General's, the guidance that's come through on the MG6 forms has put more emphasis on the police making sure that they do the disclosure. But also what seems to have happened over a period of time is the burden of the work has shifted more away from the CPS and more towards the police. And that's just been something that legislation has caused. We work hard on the quality of the files. Often the cynic in me would say it's quite a convenient excuse on occasions for the CPS. However, our homework isn't always as tidy as I would want it to be on every occasion. And I think we have to be open to that, and we're working with that. We've got a dedicated team of file checkers that work from Mansfield, and we try and operate a gateway system to maintain the quality before it leaves our shores, let's say. But it's fair to say that there's loads of work going on the digital side of things to try and improve this so that we can, in effect, get it down the electronic pipe. The problems in the past are the pipe's not been big enough and it's got a load of holes in it, in very simple terms.
Thank you. Just going back to the, sorry, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. But I am really keen when measuring things that we measure our file quality. So it is something I will be putting into my police and crime plan. But also, I totally get what the Chief says about CPS pushing everything back to the police, and also the amount of work we have to, and time has to be spent redacting information before it goes to CPS is shocking, and that I think it's unfair that's all being pushed back. So that's because as a group of police and crime commissioners we're all fighting to push that back across to CPS.
Thank you. You stole my question, which was going to be, do you do dip sampling of the files and have you got a target? And clearly that's in the pipeline. Councillor Inglis, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just a question to the Chief, really. With the files that are going in, I know CPS are always wanting every I dotted, every T crossed, putting a huge demand on the officers for a full file. Are they still using abbreviated files for sort of anticipated guilty pleas?
It tends to work, Rob, on the GAP and NGAP. GAP is guilty anticipated plea, and the other one is not guilty anticipated plea. But compared to what most people would be aware of, and certainly your experience, we have to put a lot more in these days than ever we did. And we quite often get a list back of additional things. So we quite often have to do a full file before we get a charging decision. And that does take, as you know, quite a lot of extra work, you know, compared to what it used to take. Okay. But you can say strategically that the burden with legislation changes and the volume plus the COVID backlog has certainly placed more, you know, emphasis on our side than it has on the CPS side of the business.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions on this particular paper? Then in that case, it would be my intention on behalf of the panel to write and thank the Court Service for the update. I think it seems as if things have moved considerably since we first embarked on this particular dialogue. And I think the Vice Chair put it very well in saying that probably that our position now at the moment now is that's closed down. Clearly, if at some point in the future you wish to revisit it, then we'll be here waiting for you, as you might say. And perhaps
when we write to the court system, I know, and thanking them for all the work, will you be commenting on the fact that there is a big backlog is causing everybody concerned a problem, or are we not going to mention anything like that? Are we going to just say thank you very much?
I didn't particularly want to get into any specifics. To pick out one would perhaps be invidious, but I'll take advice on that. My intention was to write a nice thank you letter, sort of closes it down in one sense, and also in a very diplomatic way to send that we were clearly disappointed that they were unable to attend any of our meetings. It might have expedited things more quickly had we been able to have had that sort of dialogue in person, and really not to go into the details, because I think it very much is in the Commissioner's arena now again to pursue these matters with the Chief Constable, and they'll prompt us if needs be. Are people content with that as a way forward? I'm sensing yes, thank you. No recommendations, we just received the report, so we can move on then to Item 6, I beg your pardon, the Police and Crime Panel 21 to 24. And I think this is the Commissioner's.
Thank you. In June, the panel requested an update on the work being done to develop my police and crime plan for 2021 to maybe 2025 or 24 or so. As you know, I'm very keen to ensure my plan is genuinely informed by the evidence of need and my engagement with local communities, partner agencies over the summer. For that reason, this paper focuses mainly on the process for developing my plan, which also includes a refresh of Nottinghamshire's police and crimes need assessment, a series of consultation events, and work to develop a new performance framework. The work is in progress, with a review to representing you with my draft plan to the panel in November. The programme of summer engagement is well underway. I've been listening events all across the county. Just this morning, I had an event with the VRU sector. I've met with the Violence Against Women and Girls sector and Nottinghamshire's Community Listening Group, which brings together representatives from Faith and BAME organisations. I've already also held my community engagement events in Newark and Bassetlaw. These have highlighted some really important issues and concerns for me that I want to take forward in my plan. I've heard, for example, about the need to strengthen our response to rural crime, the need for longer, sustainable funding for the VORG sector, the need to get better to responding to low-level ASB and hate crime issues that quickly can escalate into more significant community tensions. We have many more listening events scheduled through September and October. I've listed these on page 22 and 23 of the report. And I'd really like to encourage everyone to sign up to these events. And if you haven't already, have your say on my proposed priorities. My police and crime plan will be structured according to 3 priority themes: preventing, responding, and supporting. First and foremost, I want to prevent crime from happening in the first place and protect people from harm. I've committed to investing in crime prevention initiatives and early intervention approaches that will enable us to do this, whether it's target hardening schemes, such as through the Safer Streets programme, education and diversion schemes to divert young people from crime and exploitation, or that tertiary prevention to reduce the repeat risk of offending. I'm particularly interested in exploring the use of specialist teams in schools to engage with vulnerable young people, exploring opportunities to strengthen community payback and referrals to drug treatments, and other work to deal with the causes rather than the consequences of crime and ASB. My second priority is to ensure we are effective in our response to crime and issues that are of greatest concern to our communities. This is absolutely about making the best use of our resources, ensuring Nottinghamshire receives its fair share of funding, and ensuring that we continue to increase our police officer numbers in Nottinghamshire on visible and accessible they are in communities too. As part of this, I want to make sure that we're making best use of our tools to tackle ASB, that residents are aware of the community trigger process, and that we are unapologetically tough on crime, whether it's through operations such as Operation Reacher, Operation Guardian, targeted at days of action, greater use of AMPR, or the work that we're doing to tackle serious and organised crime that's absolutely blighting our local communities. And finally, my third priority is to better support victims and the communities so we all feel safe. We have some excellent victim support services in Nottinghamshire, particularly those who are victims, supporting those of victims of domestic and sexual abuse. But I want them to be even better. I also want to see improvements in confidence to report crime and ASB, and better identification of vulnerability and hidden harm. Nearly finished. So I'm looking at a range of options to tackle this ambition, but closer working with the criminal justice system, as we've just discussed, is absolutely key. I want to ensure that my plan to help deliver swift justice for victims, less attrition, and more perpetrators brought to justice. As I've mentioned, we're developing a performance framework that will help me. And as you, as panel members, will be able to track progress as we deliver against this plan. I will share with this panel alongside the draft plan in November. In the meantime, I'd like to offer you every opportunity to engage with my office more closely between now and November as we develop the plan. And perhaps you'd like to think about nominating a lead or link panel member for the county and for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think Councillor Edwards had a question on this particular paper.
Yes, well, I've got a specific question, a bit of a general point on a low-level aspect of antisocial behaviour, and then just a general sense of reaction to what was just said, really, which certainly had a sense of not referencing back to what's already in place. So what is it that's going to change? And I think that's what I'll certainly be looking out for. As always, the things that we look out for in terms of what people bring forward in a plan is what's its ambition? Is the planning supported? Is the planning properly there? Is the performance management systems in place? Is the capability there, the capacity there, the culture there, and the legitimacy there? And those are the criteria that we'll be looking straight away on any plan that comes. And then to understand need. And I mean, just one small example of something happened in the Meadows recently, whereas for a week we were plagued with people motorbiking around a certain circuit of a 4-lane road that exists in the New Meadows. And the answer I got was, no, we're too busy on drugs. But in fact, one police car in 45 minutes with 3 interventions on a Saturday afternoon stopped the problem. But I'll tell you now, the only person who reported it's a problem was me. And that thing of how are you going to work out what the need is if for the first situation, you've actually got communities who don't feel confident to report it in the first place. And we are a mile on, in some instances, to the kind of situations in some communities where they think they've got a problem and they ain't got problems like we've got. And the problems we got in the Meadows, we got a new kind of rough sleeping taking place at the moment. I'm not sure anyone's reporting that either. But I know the police are aware. I know how difficult it is to tackle, and how difficult it is to deal with. And I'm not sure you'll get it in a public meeting, unless you want to come down to the Meadows and do it there. Then you might get it. There is something too about improving what we do with intelligence. Graffiti. Now I know it's a joint responsibility, but we have a situation where people are actually putting their names in paint on walls. Now, all right, it's not their actual name. They're not that daft. And they don't do it at times when they'd get caught doing it. But we seem to be missing a step about sort of saying, well, we can work out who they are and we can let them know who they are. And I would just like, I'm going to try and raise this in a different forum, actually, but to try and get some kind of city cooperation between police and council staff to say, what do we do about finding a few more of these people and letting it be known? And I think we're just missing something there. And I hope the police can pick up on that. I am aware, of course, that you've been meeting with the BAME communities, and I want to refer to an email that I think has been sent to you on the 18th of August, but I'm not entirely sure. And whether you've had this precise email or not, it's beside the point anybody. Anyway, because there's 2 things. It's the concern about stop and search. What's the impact? Is there going to be any change? Are the police having to plan for changing the way they do stop and search? Because there's been a sense in which that's been good for Nottinghamshire, the way Nottinghamshire police have been doing it. But I appreciate some feedback on that. And then there was a report on disproportionate use of police powers published on the 21st of November. And there's a concern from the community meeting that I'm aware of that Notts Police have not adequately or directly responded to the key recommendations of the report. I can read more of this if you want, but if there's a sense of As there a step being missed? I think I'd just like to put it at that level today. As a step being missed in terms of responding to the report that was published in February with respect to the way the BAME communities feel about disproportionate use of police powers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You referred to a number of things which people may want an opportunity to just think about. And after the commissioners come back, I've got Mr. Vaughan Newton and Councillor Lee also waiting.
Councillor Edwards, thank you for raising those points. I think I've captured them. If I've missed them all, shout up. Firstly, when it comes to setting my police and crime plan, absolutely these public engagement events are important, but it's actually also looking at the neighbourhood priority settings, all the surveys we've been doing for years. The public will form part of it, but we need the crime needs analysis to all build into it too. It's a big piece of work, which is why I can't share what it's going to my police and crime plan is going to be yet, because I'm still working on it and I am still listening. The stop and search and the key recommendations regarding the disparities, that letter has been replied to. The letter that came in on the 18th. Okay.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Edwards?
So it's still current in my circles. There's a sense in perhaps paragraph 7.1 of the letter that was sent on the 18th of August. There's still something to go at there. Now maybe this is just going to get sorted out in correspondence, but if you can have a look again at the concerns raised in 7.1, that would be appreciated.
Thank you. It sounds like something that just needs to deal with outside the forum now, doesn't it? Thank you. Mr. Vaughan Newton.
Thank you, Chair. You'll never catch me failing to support you on preventative work. It's an old way of saying it, but an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I don't know what the modern day equivalent of that is, but I'm sure there is one somewhere.
I'm absolutely going to steal that though, thank you.
Okay. It's particularly important to get upstream of crime with young people before they get into trouble. And I'm very happy that the Chief implemented the schools and early intervention officers 3 years ago now, is it? A brilliant team of, I think there are 11 and a sergeant, and they cover the whole of the force area. They're tied to a particular geographical area, and they can deal and complete interventions in schools where the management allows. And that's sometimes an important point, particularly with academy chains. The other side of that is on-street intervention with young people. And there are people called youth intervention workers who apparently are on temporary contracts, and there's some doubt over whether those contracts will be renewed. It seems to me that the kind of work they're doing is something that is quite important. And so I would ask, what can the Commissioner do to challenge the government on funding for preventative programmes that help to keep young people out of the criminal justice system?
Is what I was doing yesterday. Yesterday I had a meeting with Kit Malthouse with my Police and Crime Commissioner colleagues, and all of us were talking about how difficult it is when you just get 1 year grants to do things. We're pushing for 3 year grants as much as we can. That is difficult. But actually, the violence reduction unit, we're on the cusp of getting a three year grant, and that would make a massive difference. Could I just share a story about some of the work the violence reduction unit are doing, because it is directly relevant to the early intervention? Thank you. So early this year, our delivery partners received a referral regarding a young boy who we shall call Milo. The school reported that Milo had threatened another student with a knife. Milo had previously had some support through a provider at a young age around domestic abuse. Milo had witnessed and overheard physical and emotional abuse from dad to mum. Dad no longer had contact with the family, but had accessed Milo's Facebook account and had actually made death threats to his mum. Milo was aware of this, and because of his experience, he suffered from panic attacks and symptoms of PTSD. And this happened every time his dad made a link with him. He was also struggling to calm himself down and manage his emotions. So the programme we put in place through the VRU had a positive effect on Milo's life. It allowed him a safe place to explore his emotions and experiences, on how to reflect how he deals with relationships. He's been given the freedom to speak about things when he wants to, without any pressure, and to not to disclose any information he didn't want to. And as a result of this, he's now on a positive trajectory. I've got so many of these stories that we're working with the VRU, and I'd really welcome the opportunity at one of the future meetings, maybe Chair, to bring Nat, who's the interim director from the VRU, along.
I think that would be an excellent idea, and I'll ask Joe to put that in the programme.
Yeah.
We've often had presentations from different parts of the Commissioner's office and also from the Chief Constable, and they've always been well received by members. Thank you.
Yeah, because the VRU absolutely fits into the preventative work that we want to be doing.
Thank you. I'm just conscious you.
Thank you very much. The biggest issue that I find in my community, and I'm sure everybody here will agree, is to getting communities to report antisocial behaviour and crime, especially with sometimes it can take up to an hour to get through to 101 to speak to somebody to report it. I've been on the phone personally where it's took me up to an hour to get through to somebody to report antisocial behaviour. And when you're ringing 4 or 5 times a week about different incidents, you can be on the phone a long time. What I would ask is for something very easily, like say the MyNots app that we use in Nottinghamshire, where somebody could very easily put a dot on a map, put the issue and send it off, and it can go directly to the community support teams. That would free up your staff from answering telephones and allow somebody to do something that should be taking 10 minutes at the max to report. And I think doing that would allow people to think, well, it's only going to take me a few minutes, I'll do it that way, because it does put a lot of people off, and especially when they're not getting any response back of what has happened through that report, and a lot of people just feel not engaged with the process, and that's the biggest issue that I find.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor, for raising that. I'm really disappointed to hear that 1 hour thing, because we've actually been dip diving and checking up on the 101 and the 999, and the numbers we've got is that actually we're performing well. One of the reasons I wanted to do that, I'll be frank, is that in the beating crime plan, there's going to be a league table for 101 and 999 calls, and I wanted to get ahead of the drag curve and check we're okay. And everything I've seen is that we are. So
I'll take your number and the day and time and cross-reference it with the system.
Yeah, because
and I'll personally come back to you.
Thank you. You make a good point about the online reporting. That is something we're looking at doing as well, isn't it? So, we're already doing it.
Yeah, people can contact us online. But ASB is a local responsibility with the council, so they can contact the council as well on the council's number and the council's website, and also on the police website and the police number. Usually when it goes through to the control room, it's passed through to one of the beat team officers. So sometimes if it's not an immediate crime happening, it can be a delayed response, because it's usually a partnership response, as you know, and they'll decide which is the best way to try and problem solve it. But if it's a bit of a here and now thing, it's a bit like Mike's point earlier on. If it's one of the local team that you've got that link in with, very often you get a very quick response to the problem, because you know who's patrolling locally and you see them out and about. And obviously with the motorbikers, that sounded like we got the right outcome very quickly. But that's what they do in the control room. They are really good at answering the telephone. So I'm going to come back to you and I'll share the results with the panel as well.
Yeah, because we are measuring how quickly 999 calls are answered and 101 calls, but also not just how they're answered, what actually happens to them, because you can answer them and not do anything with it that's helpful, which some police forces are doing just to get the numbers down, I'll be frank. I'm happy with the quality of our calls, but we'll look into it.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference. The calls are being answered very quickly, but to get that reply back and the information back is what is taking the time. So I completely agree with you. 999 instantaneously, and they are responding very, very quickly. But the difference between reporting motorbikes and then getting a call back, where are they, what they're doing, is the difference. So I completely agree with what you're saying, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. I've got Mr. Vaughan-Newton and then Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of information, Neighbourhood Alert has a function on it which allows you to put a dot on the map and pinpoint the location and put in some free text about what's going on.
And we're actually going to be stepping up what we're doing with Neighbourhood Alert. We're calling it NOTS Alert going forward, and we're going to be using it more as a tool. It's a fantastic tool, and we've just scratched the surface of what we can do with that. It is, yes, yes, and I've been down to see Mike, and we're having conversations.
Councillor Smith, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not going to talk about the 101 directly, but more indirectly. It's one of the biggest complaints that I've been getting at the moment is that when it is the lower level reports to 101, people get very disheartened that because they don't get a police presence, they don't get the police to come out to the incident. So they stopped reporting it. Now, I was at a public meeting a couple of weeks ago where I urged them to go through Crime Stop, to do all that sort of stuff. But the Chief Constable made a good point about that if it's lower level like ASB, it can go through to the council. I don't know if there's a way, because I know in Ashfield, our CPO sit with the police in Ashfield. We don't get the reports till the next day of incidents that have taken place that night. I don't know if there's a way that if you guys get something come in that evening, you haven't got the ability to send somebody out to respond. Could you pass that on to the team I know we do joint patrols on a Friday and Saturday, but what I'm saying is, can we expand on that to pass over some of that work to our teams so we can work a bit closer so that the residents feel that they are being listened to? That was a very long-winded way of saying that thing.
And the answer is yes.
Thank you. Councillor Inglis, I think.
Yeah, just a quick one regarding the 101. It's something I've brought up before, and it's something I've certainly got frustration with, is when you try to report an incident that doesn't warrant a 3-9 call, is you have to go through the whole system to item 6 to report something. So option 1 is, do you want to speak to someone in custody? Do you want to report update a crime? Do you want to speak to an officer? Do you want to update some property? But no, I want to report an incident, but you have to wait. It's almost 2 minutes on the call to get that. So I really would like that to be number 1. So I'm just reiterating it from before.
And the reason it's not is because when they've done the research, they've ordered them in the sort of priority of the volume that people ring. So that's, you try and get the majority sorted on number 1 and then work your way down the list, if you see what I mean. So quite often a lot of the calls that come to us are to speak to an officer, to update a crime, to get put through to custody. The volume on the sort of kind of report something on the 101 sometimes isn't sort of top of the tree, if you know what I mean. But just on the broader point of 101, the Commissioner mentioned it, and I think it's only right that I sort of, put this to everybody, is that they are going to start really looking at 101 and 999 performance. And we've got some of the best performance in the country. It's less than a second quite often to pick a 999 up, hardly any are dropped. And also when it comes to 101 call performance, we really are standing up really very well with regards to the rest of the country. We have got a good operating model, and relatively we are good at answering the telephone. And I know, you said it took an hour when you mentioned the first one, then you said they were really quick. When I look at the stats, for most times during the day and even in the early evening, they are good at answering the calls and getting back. But the point that you made, Helen, I think is really absolutely bob on. At peak times, a 101 stacked against an immediate requirement for the police to come, your ASB, when it comes to threat, harm and risk, isn't going to get that level of, elevation. That's the honest truth of the matter, because there aren't the resources to do it immediately.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Mary Browse. Thank you.
Yeah, good. And just speak on a couple of points we've already spoken about. So definitely like to add my weight to get in a 3-year deal for the youth workers. I used to work for an organisation called Real Education, and they're alternative education provider. And a lot of the young people I worked with, they were involved in crime. And a lot of it's about relationship building. It just doesn't happen overnight. And that trust comes with time. And so if there is a youth support worker, it could take quite a few months before you actually start to get that trust, and then you start to turn the corner and start to see some results. I mean, the cost benefit of this is massive. If you think about a young person that we in crime prevention, over the long run, we're saving thousands and thousands of pounds. And we are coming from a position where we've had, over the last 5 years, a progressive up to 50% cut in youth services. So, I really would want to really make that strong case for that 3-year, and then you've got people in place and you've got continuity, and then I think you'll get to see far better results. So that's on that one. And the other one, it may be that I don't fully understand the system, but on the new neighbourhood alert system, a lot of the people that we want to engage in this are kind of digitally afraid or not really up with technology. So I'm just raising the point about education or something, because it's no use having a Wizzo piece of kit and then it's not being used because people are afraid, they don't know what the right button to press. They've got to have confidence to use it to get the results.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I can't spend the money until I know I've got it. So until I know I've got my three-year funding settlement for my VRU, I can't guarantee those long-term contracts, and it's really frustrating to me. But managing expectations until I know I've got 3 years worth of money, I'm not going to promise it. But we have done a really compelling case to get it. I've explained how important it is, because also when people are on short-term contracts, you don't always get the best people applying for a short-term contract. And I want the best youth workers in Nottingham. We have got some fantastic youth workers in Nottingham, I'll be honest, but I want the best, and they want the security. And I absolutely get what you say about cost analysis. We have somebody who's not through the VRU, he's actually employed through the police. Ramel Davis, I'm thinking of specifically. Right, yeah. He's a vulnerable youth outreach worker. And he's actually saved so much money for the police, because what he does, he works with vulnerable communities, and he actually stops people going missing or stops people getting involved in crime. And we've actually put a price. He's saved over £1 million in the time he's been there, because we know how much it costs the police to find a missing person, or what we put a cost to investigations. Perhaps not tell him how much he's saved, or be asking for a pay rise, Chief, but some of this I'm hoping could become core business in the future and not have to rely on these grants that we're getting from government. Because if we can make the money work, and it's saving police time, there's stuff to play with there. And with regards to neighbourhood alert, it's just which is going to become NOTS alert. It's just part of the picture and how we want to engage. But I take your point that not everybody is digitally aware. Okay.
Thank you. Save my question to last then. First of all, thank you, Commissioner. Can I commend the way that you've tabulated your 3 priorities in terms of preventing, responding and supporting. That was a really helpful way of distilling out of some of the things you've talked to us about since your appointment here. The question I want to ask, and it's a conundrum, it's under the middle block there, page 27, if you've got it in front of you. I'm sure you know it off by heart. And the first one is providing resources to increase police officer numbers and holding the Chief Constable to account for increasing visibility and accessibility of the officers. And how are you going to square that when a bulk of crime is online, and obviously a lot of officer time is taken up with things that don't actually make them visible?
There's absolutely the physical beat and the digital beat, and we know the last year how adaptive criminals have been and how unfortunately online fraud and how much crime is enabled by digital has increased. We need to build the public's confidence on what we're doing there. We do have a local digital team. There's a national one as well. But also I'm very keen to do more preventative work, so less people are at harm or at risk of harm of being victims of online fraud. Operationally, do you want to take a few words there?
Yeah, so specifically in relation to fraud, and nationally there's been an increase. I think it was last reported about 20%. I think ours is something like 16.7%. The reality is during lockdown, much more of that was reported and people found different ways of committing different crimes online. Increasingly, there's an online footprint to most crimes now, but the very complex frauds are dealt with nationally, and some are also disseminated to the force. The force has really increased its fraud capacity, and that's both for online fraud and some of the traditional frauds. And we continue to sort of be one of the high prosecuting forces. I think we're in about the top 7 or 8 in the country of reports that we get and the prosecutions that we launch on the back of them. But certainly the point's well made. It's how do you square that circle? Because sometimes it's that conundrum of the cost of achieving virtually nothing where nothing is a success. So in other words, counter-terrorism, the cost of achieving no terrorist incident is huge behind the scenes. And some of that is similar when it comes to things like children's safeguarding. We do an absolute raft of stuff that you never see a police officer in uniform doing to keep kids safe. And I'll always do that as chief. And I'll always try and strike the right balance between, you know, the uniform, the visibility side, but the real niche protective stuff that you've got to do to keep people safe.
And as Police and Crime Commissioner, I think I need to be shouting more about what other stuff the police are doing, so people have an understanding that we have the physical beat and the digital beat.
Thank you. It is a circle square thing, isn't it? That you can't square this circle because often what people want to report, as we've been hearing this morning, are things that impact on their daily life and want the visible presence of a police officer, which is quite different to the type of crime that's online. So it was just an interesting point that was in your tablet there. Thank you. Any other questions at all? If not, there are 2 recommendations. Recommendation 2.1 is easy, to note your report, and thank you for that. Recommend 2.2 is quite interesting, and thank you. You've made a suggestion there that we consider whether we should nominate a particular person from this committee on to represent the county or the city. I'd like to take that away and discuss it with colleagues, because this committee is formed by people actually all having an equal right of access. So before saying yes or before saying no, I'd want to consult with our democratic officers and take some soundings of that. And perhaps there might be a different way of achieving what it is you're wanting to achieve. Are members content with those proposals? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner. That takes us then to item 7, your update report, which are pages 33 to 84. Over to you, Commissioner. Thank you. I'll switch.
Thank you. So the last 3 months have been an incredibly busy period for me and my office, as you can see from the update paper. You'll be aware that in May, I set out a 90-day plan featuring a range of immediate actions that I committed to do during my first 90 days in office. But just before we move to my update paper, I'm pleased to announce today that one of the things on my 90 days plan is I'm launching my Make Nots Safe grants. This fund will see seed corn for local third sector organisations to deliver against my police and crime priorities. This might include, for example, prevention initiatives to better prevent and protect vulnerable people from fraud and neighbourhood crimes, youth intervention and diversity activities that complement the initiatives that we currently have in place. Responding to the issues of greatest local concern, which could include speeding, rural crime, supporting community-led initiatives such as Neighbourhood Watch, Farm Watch and Community Speed Watch. Supporting victims and communities to be safe and feel safe, particularly among victims of hate crime and those less likely to come into contact with the police and our mainstream victim service providers. Community organisations are able to bid for funding of up to £10,000 to be spent within this financial year and subject to future funding. I plan to launch another round of funding for 22-23. Grant application forms, guidance notes and template funding agreements will be available on my website, which is nottinghamshire.pcc.police.uk, and they'll be available for 5 o'clock this evening. The deadlines for applications is Thursday, the 30th of November. So, sorry, 30th of September. The money hopefully will be coming out in November. Thank you, Dan. So, looking back at my first 90 days, I'm pleased to report that I've been able to deliver all but one of these actions within my first 90 days in office, with the final action due to be completed by the end of October. As promised, I've listened to the views of Newark residents on the planned relocation of Newark Police Station. I will be announcing the next steps on Newark Police Station shortly. We were successful in securing a range of new funding streams during my first 90 days in office, which included round 2 of the Safer Streets funding, which was £862,000 for target hardening and securing improvements in Nottingham and Mansfield. And that was more money than any other county got across the country. £675,000 for Youth Intervention Programme, funding for interventions of young people in custody. £1.8 million to strengthen domestic and sexual violence support services, and that goes through to 2023. This is enabling us to appoint 17 new specialist independent domestic violence advisors, known as ISVAs, and independent sexual violence advisors, ISVAs. We're going to increase specialist family court, counselling support and FGM support across the force area. And I'm pleased to announce we've got some more new bidding opportunities in the pipeline. I've submitted a further bids for 1.1 million to fund improved safety and feelings of safety among women in Worksop, South and in Sutton and Ashfield. 300k to improve, another bid for 300k to improve safety in Nottingham City. On a condition, we've had a conditional offer from the Youth Endowment Fund for further programmes. Now this is close to my heart, is to divert young vulnerable people from custody. Through this activity and the wider work of the Violence Reduction Partnership, which I now chair, we're in a really strong position to drive further reductions in serious violence and divert more young people from the criminal justice system. I want to be clear, my work doesn't stop here. I'm fully committed to continuing to identify new funding opportunities, and I'm absolutely determined that Nottinghamshire receives its fair share of resources. I'm also pleased to report we're now seeing a strong progress in recruiting officers as part of the National Uplift Programme during this period. This has brought the total number of officers recruited under Uplift to 211 and the total officer head count to 2,232. Many of our new recruits are from ethnically diverse backgrounds, and with the BAME representation having risen by 3.8% since the start of the Uplift to 7%. Female representation has risen from 31 to 35% since the beginning of the programme. The one area of my 90-day plan that I've been unable to complete within the 90-day period is the review of my Office of Police and Crime Commissioner and the responsibilities. I am, however, pleased to report that this work is well underway and is due to be completed in October. I've appointed an independent consultant to take the review. My update includes an overview of performance, so I'll now hand over to Dan Howitt, Head of Research and Performance, to speak about this.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, you'll find in your papers on page 57 the latest quarterly performance and insight report, which covers the period up to June 2021. It's very much a point in time, and things obviously move on. So I will, as we work through some of this, put in context the position, how that position's changed since June 2021. The report's still aligned to the 2018 to 2021 police and crime plan, but as you've heard, we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes to develop a suite of outcome measures that will be linked to the new plan. And we will be, I think, retaining the format that the panel have been instrumental in helping us to develop over the last couple of years. I think it's a format that does work well for us. So the main performance headlines, in terms of prevention, we're still, certainly in the report that you have in front of you, still reporting reductions in overall crime as of June this year, a 12% reduction. But we have in fact seen sort of over the summer period a steady kind of return to norm as the coronavirus restrictions have eased and the retail and nighttime economies opened up. But some of the main exceptions to this have been burglary, vehicle crime and robbery, which have remained well below levels that we'd normally expect for this time of year. So there's very much a kind of a positive, if there's a positive outcome from the pandemic, it's clearly visible there. 30% reduction in burglary and vehicle crime, 25% reduction in robbery. And I think obviously the change in lifestyles that we've seen post-pandemic are undoubtedly a factor in this, but with more people working from home, fewer commuting, more natural surveillance in communities. But of course, we're also seeing kind of the additional investment in target hardening measures in hotspot areas as a result of the Safer Streets Fund in Newark and Mansfield and the city centre that have just been mentioned. And we'll be evaluating the impact of that later in the year. Positively, we're, as the Chief has mentioned, we're also seeing that continued increase in safeguarding referrals, up 16%, in the number of child sexual exploitation cases that are being identified, up 5%. And I know this is something we've reported on before at this meeting, but we're certainly seeing kind of that earlier identification of risk, better recording, better referral processes, and in theory, a reduction in the risk of harm. A couple of areas of concern that I probably just wanted to highlight were around, primarily the experience of fraud, which again we've already mentioned, and online crime during the pandemic. The rise here has been evident in both the police and crime survey and the police recorded crime picture, both of which have seen sort of marked increases over the last year. And I think what I would say here is that the risk has risen much more sharply than the actual incidents have. So when we look at kind of the number of people telling us that they've been targeted for online fraud, so this is looking specifically at attempts, we've seen a sort of 46% increase, but the number of people actually experiencing loss as a result of a successful attempt has increased by sort of only 22%, very similar to the figures that we're seeing, the police reported crime figures. And I think the point here is that we really need to sort of unpick the impact of fraud, with the vast majority being quite low level, that have very little impact on quality of life, or at least that's what we're getting from our survey. And it's in those minority of cases involving vulnerable people or major losses that we clearly need an increased focus, along with the obvious opportunities brought about by the police and crime plan to improve sort of prevention and education in this area. The other area to mention is domestic abuse incidents and occurrences, which we're still showing a reduction as at June this year in the report, but we as restrictions have eased during the summer, certainly the monthly data has showed some marked increases, similar to the increases that we saw during the lockdown easing of last year. That's something that we're sort of clearly aware of, and there's been additional funding provided by central government to support victims, the increased demand on victim services. So in terms of response, it's clear that the drop in volume crime experienced during the pandemic has enabled the police to increase their focus on sort of more proactive areas, as we've seen through the Operation Reacher programme and Guardian and the Operation Guardian in the city centre, and more proactive work to identify drug use and dealing. That's clearly reflected in the performance report with the increase in police recorded drug offences.
Thank you, Dan. That was a whistle-stop tour through quite a lot of information. And when we went through the report, there are a number of colleagues who obviously have got specific things, so we'll take them as they flag them up, I think, because you've covered quite a wide brief there. Mr. Vaughan Newton to kick us off, and then Councillor Lee. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Taking Dan's last point about the number of first-time entrants to the youth justice system in the city, is there a trend that could be identified as causing the increase? And what's happening across the rest of the force area, please?
Yeah, so for quite a while, the trend has been down in city and county. The last 2 or 3 years, county have seemed to have reduced first-time entrants more. But I think overall, the decision making from the youth justice managers who work for the city and work for the county is decision making that I would concur with broadly. I think they do their very best to prevent first-time entrants, but as you can see from those figures, some of those young people really do need formal support that the system brings. And I don't just mean locking up support, I mean formal support of the wraparound care and more of the sort of, holding to account of them and their parental sort of carers, let's say, as well. So overall, I think the figures for me, stand up to scrutiny. But with regards to caseloads through COVID, certainly colleagues in the city and the county, the first time entrants went right down because, again, the courts, and we've heard before, were struggling to deal, etc. So there's a little bit of the bounce back, but be under no illusion that, we are arresting and dealing with some of those young people and they are entering the system.
Thank you. I'm going to, I'd just like to say, obviously, representing Nottinghamshire District Council, we fully support the Newark Police Station being moved. But I also wanted to mention, very happy, shocked and surprised, 37,700 people engaged with the consultation. I know you did mention that you will be announcing soon. I'm wondering if you have got a rough date on that, of when that will be announced, your consultation on that.
Watch this space, Jono.
That's your response then. That's it.
Yeah. And it's 37,000 people who engaged through social media. We also had all the surveys and the public engagement. Yeah, so we're looking at what those responses are, and I know that you as a councillor are supporting the move. But I'm listening to what the whole of the community want and having some very interesting conversations with the chief, and there will be a decision made shortly.
Thank you. I've got Councillor McRae, Councillor Smith and Councillor Camilleri. So we'll take those in that order.
Yeah. I've got 3 questions. Do you want me to just do one, then let someone else do one, then come back later, or do you want 3 questions in a row? Or?
It depends how easy they are.
I'm not going to tell you that, am I? I'll do one, and then I was going to say
let's if they're different, distinctive things.
Yeah, they are different. Yeah, yes. I'll do one question, then go to someone else, then come back to me. But just before I ask my first question, I have got 3 thank yous, and I'll be really quick because it's important to thank people. You mentioned Rommel Davies earlier. The guy's an absolute legend. I was going to say, don't pay him what he's worth in his weight of gold, because his muscles are massive. You don't have no money left. But he did an event on Ickens Lane Park, which engaged with about 60 youngsters. You came along yourself, so it's important to thank him. Secondly, and this is on behalf of the family of Joe Whitchurch, this is to the police. I just want to say thank you, and I'm going to try and do this without getting upset, because you know what you've done, and I just think, again, it's important. It's been to court and everything, so thank you on behalf of those. And then thirdly, I'd just like to thank the Commissioner, because a local church in Stapleford applied to the previous Commissioner for some funding. Unfortunately, that was rejected. So I know that the officers at Broxton Borough Council have worked really hard. They put a further application in for the same amount, £25,000, and I think it's just recently been signed off by the new Commissioner. So I'm happy with that. I will thank the officers at Broxton tomorrow, because they did all the work to make it happen. But, you know, you're sending money our way, so I'm going to thank you for that. So that was the easy bit. And my question is, reference is made to the launch of the second phase of the Stop Violence social media campaign in September 2021.
I'd love to talk about this. It's really exciting. It's part of...
I asked the question, yeah. I'm glad you're excited, but I'll ask you the question, then you can get even more excited. Can the Commissioner provide an overview on the first phase of the campaign and what he has achieved? And could you also provide an overview of the second phase we'll add to the campaign? Now you can come back excited.
Okay, so I've got a real passion for stopping crime before it happens, and this is working with the VRU, and they're actually working with the youth to see, rather than us thinking what they need to see. This is a youth-led. This is going to be talking about cuckooing. It's going to be talking about going OT, which is county lines. You don't say county lines anymore. You say going OT. You say trap houses, not cuckooing. It's using their language and doing some really exciting social media films that are social media short clip films, which has been youth-led. So I can't talk too much about what's happened previous before I got my knees under the table, but I know what's going to be happening going forward, and I'm really excited about it. And there's going to be flash mobs and all sorts of stuff to get loads of attention, and we're going to be shouting about making sure young people. It's all about stopping violence and talking to young people, from young people, about what's best for them. Also, if I can just add to that. With the youth work, we're going to be launching through the VRU a youth work programme. I'm really keen to increase it over the county, as you know, and identifying and reducing risks in partnership work with education, but really going big on this Stopping Violence campaign. It's we're doing some really exciting work with the VRU.
Thank you for that. You do sound excited, and I do think it's about time we started listening to the youngsters as well. So thank you for doing that, because it's something I've been banging on about for ages. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Of course, once they know golden oldies know the language, they'll change the language. You do realise that. There'll be streets ahead of us, literally. Thank you. We'll come back to you, Councillor McRae. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'd say as Councillor McRae, I've got a couple of questions, so I'll just do one at a time. But my first one is in reference to the Victim Care app on page 37. I think it's an absolutely brilliant idea. I've got no issues with that. But what I would say is there any way that we could adapt it slightly to include witnesses, or do something separate for witnesses? Because I know that there was somebody that I know had an issue where he's a witness in a case that's been postponed 5 times now, and he was trying to get some information. And he was really struggling to get hold of anyone that he could actually speak to. So he actually ended up having to go down to the local police station to find out the right numbers and who to speak to. So I didn't know if there was something we could look at for dealing with witnesses as well as the victims.
Helen, you make a really good point. I'm not sure if actually a witness would count as a victim and whether they could actually use this, because they really are, aren't they? So I'll look into that. Thank you for raising it.
Thank you for that. Councillor Camilleri, then Councillor Ellis, please.
Thank you. It's to do with Newark Police Station. It's a very controversial thing. I worry about shutting police stations in towns such as Newark, where you're going perhaps next, Mansfield perhaps, Worksop struggling. You've had a tendency to put them in with council officers, which don't know if that works. Policemen do like to go back to the station. They learn more there. Are you going to start working from home? When you arrest somebody in, say, Worksop or Newark, when the police station's closed, will you have to take them to the new custody officers in Radford? It's Radford Road there, I think. It's all about money, and I'm not sure that you're doing the right thing. But however, we'll wait for the thing to come out. But I'm very cautious about this money saving thing. You're talking about prevention, young children. They don't see a police station there, they ain't going to be that bothered.
I haven't said which way it's going yet. Watch it. I'm listening to what people are saying.
Chair, may I just say something? Operationally, I would disagree with some of your observations with regards to other places where we've co-located. We don't have many people working from home. We have great relationships. Yeah, and just so as a factual issue, the station, the proposal is it relocates 600 yards. Proposal isn't to close and have no police station in Newark or to reduce any of the resources. Just that factual thing, I think I just need to correct you on, because I don't want to set any hairs racing. But
I agree. I understand that. Perhaps I don't know, but I know there tends to be a trend. Will you be able to keep people in custody in the new police station, or will you have to move them to Nottingham?
And sorry, I missed your second point.
Okay.
Yeah, operationally, we have 2 custody suites, one at Mansfield and the new one in town, which opens in a couple of weeks, which you'll all be getting a tour around. That's been the case for a number of years. We deal with people in those custody suites.
Newark.
Sorry, no, we don't deal with any at Newark because operationally there isn't that demand, which was a decision operationally that I took 3 years ago. And considering the demands nationally and locally, that isn't an operational decision I'm going to be changing.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Q.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of comments and then a couple of questions. Can I just follow up the last comment? As in Gedling, we've had co-location of the public protection team and the neighbourhood policing team, and that is working really well. You get all the advantages of, I was going to say, water cooler conversations. Or, you know, the only downside, of course, is that the biscuits seem to go missing quite frequently. And the second question, second comment rather, because the Chief Constable wasn't here last time, is just to note the success of the figures, crime figures we had to March this year. And I know he was proud of it because he put a press release out about it. But where we had a reduction of 21% in all crime in Nottinghamshire compared to 13% nationally, and I presume that the City of London's a bit of a blip, so that puts us at the top of the league table. I think it's a very creditable performance by the force over the last year. A couple of questions on page, and Dan's already alluded to the concern about fraud and online crime, and we talked about it before in here, and I like the term digital beat. But until we can get Channel 5 and police interceptors interested in watching police officers and computers, it's not going to be as sexy as their BMWs chasing around the streets, is it? So the report, the performance information indicates a 17% increase in levels of fraud and 11% on online crime. I wasn't quite sure what Dan was saying. He said, I think he said a 22% increase in loss. Are these? Is a 17% increase? Are they actual fraud? Or are they attempted fraud? Because I'm sure we're all victims of attempted fraud. You know, I know I'll go home and there'll be 2 or 3 emails trying to defraud me. So I just wonder if that's actual successful fraud or attempts. Is that question? And the second question, picking up the Commissioner's comment about getting the fair share of resources for Nottinghamshire. I know we've heard for years the concern about the funding formula. And I think it's been described that Nottinghamshire's got rural funding and urban problems. I just wonder if there's an update on where with the funding formula. Thank you.
Yeah. If I go first on the funding formula, then the specific fraud question I'll pass across to the Chief. Thank you. The funding formula is being looked at, and no matter how they measure it, we've got to come out better than we are already, because we have such a low funding formula compared with the issues we have around the county. So I'm confident that we will do well on that. What worries me is that they said they're going to look at the funding formula now. Those conversations are starting to happen. It's not going to come into force till after the next general election. That's what I'm expecting. So, you know, and we know money is going to be really tight. We've got to make it work.
And part B is that figure, the 17% roughly increases all reports. So that's attempts and anything else that's been recorded. And there's an anomaly. I think I'll let you know actually in the that online fraud thing from Action Fraud is completely berserk. It's wrong. They've not got the reporting right.
But when it comes to funding, one of the things that the government seems to be doing at the moment is giving you're bidding for these projects, these short-term projects. Now, which is why it's so important that Nottinghamshire are thought really well of. So I can go and chew the ear off of the ministers and say, if you give us the money, we can show you what we can do with that. And we've got, and we really, we're really showing good value what we're doing.
Just going back though, I think what the Vice Chair said is very pertinent, really, isn't it? That we've all, at some point, got the emails, got the phone calls from, you know, Her Majesty's Court Service or wherever, and we probably don't report them. So what you're capturing are obviously the more serious issues. The under-reporting must be huge, and I wouldn't suggest that you want us to report these things to you, because it would probably send your IT system into oblivion. But I mean, do you have any feel for how to gauge the level of under-reporting? Because I think most people do have these things daily.
Yeah, I would concur with that entirely. What we tend to do is most of the action fraud stuff is collected on a national basis, and then if there are some lines of inquiry, particularly if it's UK based, it will be allocated to a specific police force. Lots of those, let's say, attempts are made on foreign soil that then come through, and you're absolutely right, it's hugely underreported, and I think lots of people have just got used to ignoring it.
You want to come back?
Yeah, just to add, I guess one of the complicating factors here is we're looking at sort of different sources of data. So we've got the police recorded crime picture, we've got the action fraud, which, as the Chief mentions, there's been a problem with the portal. So not those figures aren't to be stressed at the moment. But we're also looking at our police and crime survey, which asks all residents whether they've been a victim of a fraud attempt, an attempt of fraud, whether it resulted in loss, and so on. So this is some of the figures that I quoted earlier are from slightly different sources, so that's why they don't tally up. But what we can say with some degree of certainty is there's been a substantial increase in attempts of fraud, and a smaller increase in successful attempts at fraud. Also, from the Police and Crime Survey, we can see that levels of reporting to the police have actually declined over the last year. So last year, around 8.3% of those that said they've been the victim of fraud went on to report to the police, and that's dropped to 5.4 over the last year. But this is partly reflects this large increase in very low level attempts.
Did you want to come back?
Yeah, can I just be clear? So are we saying that unsuccessful attempts are less likely to be reported? I mean, I don't think I've ever reported a telephone scam. I've sent some online stuff. I forwarded online emails to action fraud if they look sufficiently serious. But presumably, I guess that if people have incurred a loss, then it's more likely to be reported. And have we got any idea of the scale of those?
The proportion experiencing a loss that go on to report to the police. Yeah, I don't have that to hand, but it's something that we could certainly look at as part of the data that we hold from the Police and Crime Survey.
What you find, David, just to finish the point, is that most people that experience a loss do report it.
Thank you. I've got Councillor McRae, Councillor Smith and Mr Vaughan Newton.
Right, thank you.
This is your second question.
It certainly is. Right, knife crime continues to be a national priority. There have been regular reports in the local media about recent knife incidents in Nottinghamshire. While some of these have been about proactive work, seizing knives before crime has been committed, every knife on the street has a potential for use as part of a violent crime. So the question is, the report highlights a reduction in knife crime over the previous 12-month period, but when comparing the first quarter of 21 to 22 to the last quarter of 20 to 21, there is an indication that the number of incidents is increasing. Can the Commissioner provide more information about what has happened to knife crime rates in the most recent quarter as lockdown has eased, and provide assurance about the measures in place to address the issues? And can we please have an update on the outcomes of the recent knife amnesty in the county? Thank you.
I'm actually going to pass that one across to Chief, because I've been asking the question to him and he's better placed to answer. Thank you.
So you're right, post-lockdown incidents have definitely gone up, but our proactivity's also increased. So we've got 2 knife crime teams now, city and county, and you will have seen some of their successes virtually on a daily basis, and that's what quite often gets reported. But it would be fair to say that that sort of pent-up demand, let's say, particularly around some of aspects of lower level and medium level drug dealing, certainly has come to the fore as the unlock has eased, and we've policed the consequences of that. So nationally, we do still sit with a reduction, which is a brilliant position to be in. We're less than the national average per 1,000 population now in Nottinghamshire, and we're in a good place. We've got the continued work at the QMC, we've got the violence interrupters, the VRU are doing a lot of work, we've got a lot going on in schools with some of the prevention work, but it's one of those unstinting things, and it is linked to some of that street level drug dealing. And you see that the success of the Reacher, and I'm trying to achieve almost like a double whammy, you know, target the dealers, target those that are carrying the weapons, and try and get a 2-for-1 for the community every time we go out.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, thank you.
Yeah, Chair, I have got 2 questions now, but one directly relates to what's just been asked. So if I could ask them both together. Thank you. The first one, which isn't directly in relation to Councillor McRae's question, is, as you know, we've had a few incidents in Ashfield. We had quite a very serious one a few weeks ago, where it was actually a machete rather than a knife. So I do find it a bit bizarre that rates are dropping. It'd be interesting if we could, rather than looking at the 1-year comparison that we've got, if we can take that back over a couple of years and bring that back to the next meeting, just because I know that with the COVID restrictions and stuff, people weren't out and about. So if we could take that back a couple of years, it'd just be interesting to see those stats. So that is my first question. My second one's on a much brighter note. It's on regarding Safe Streets funding. So firstly, I want to put on record a thank you to my officers at Ashfield District Council, Antonio Taylor in particular, that's done an awful lot of really good work around this. It's a district council led programme with yourself, I'd like to thank you for your support in that bid as well. But I was just wondering if we've got a time frame for when the money's due to be coming through.
I'll tackle the Safer Streets funding first. I actually suggested Sutton and Ashfield was in need of this. It's my secondary bid. My first bid was for Worksop because the evidence was that Worksop had a greater need. They're two really strong bids. I'm not sure if we're going to get both of them to manage expectations, but some of the stuff that we've identified together that we need to do to make those streets safer in Sutton, if we don't get the bids, we've got to try and find a way of making that happen anyway, because we want Sutton to be a vibrant, welcoming place, particularly after COVID. We want people coming back there. It's expected the announcement will be late October. Okay, disappointed, but that was from the Home Office yesterday. I know, but and I'm also working with Lee Anderson, the MP, because he's putting pressure on the Home Office too to make sure that we don't get forgotten. And I forgot what the first question was now.
Stats and
oh
yeah, we've got stats going back.
Yeah.
And we're compared to, so say COVID, if you take it as a little bit of a year of anomalies. So nationally, yes, we did reduce crime by the highest percentage apart from the square mile, which was great. But we're still tracking under crime compared to the sort of year before COVID, which is a good position to be in. But we have got stats going back.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Vaughan, thank you.
This is a perennial, I'm afraid. If we look to page 83 of the pack, which is a resources, a revenue report, Section 8, Risk Management, 8.1, monitoring of the accounts is problematic. Errors in the data continue to be reported. Now, this has been going on for years. How can you possibly operate if you don't know how much you're spending?
Charlie, if I pass this over to you, but can you mention MFSS, please?
It's the only answer I can give. So yes, you are quite aware, you have seen the reports before that multi-force shared service has continued to cause us problems, and yes, we are constantly finding errors in the data. You will be pleased to hear that from April 1 next year, we will be moving away completely from MFSS, and we are currently in the process of rolling that out. We have given our notice, and we will not be renewing the contracts, and multi-force shared services will not continue beyond there, other than obviously we've got the close down of the accounts to do, and some transfer of data to new systems. But there has been an absolutely excellent project team in force, managing the bringing in of new systems that I am happy to say that have far more controls than the current systems, and the way of working will improve tenfold at least. And that's my anticipation, because the work being done is so thorough now.
Can I just put on record thanks to the Deputy Rachel Barber, who's been leading the MFSS project. It's also, which I'm really pleased about, it's going to save us some money going forward as well.
Thank you. Councillor Lee, thank you.
Thank you. This is my second and last question. It's not a hard one, I don't think. Obviously, we're aware of the Afghan community and the families that are coming into Nottinghamshire, that I think everybody here is great for. And me, I'm serving in Afghanistan. I welcome that we're doing our bit. I've done lots of interviews over the past few months on this, and I've seen lots of racist and hate crime comments on social media. Obviously, I'm aware of what you do. I'm wondering if you could explain what you do on social media, in particular when it comes to hate crime, and what the procedures would be if somebody was to see it.
Thank you for raising that. We know we've got Afghan families coming in right now, and across the county and in the city, they're coming to join us, and it's absolutely not acceptable for any hate crime. So I'll pass over.
Yeah, so the procedure is, if you see it, you can report it. We try and find out where it's actually been placed on the whatever the social media platform is, and then whichever police force area that is, we investigate it. So we have jobs that are all over the place, to be honest with you. people that live on our patch that make comment online of that nature to, I don't know, footballers. So particularly after that, the last international competition, let's say. But we take it really seriously, report it, we'll investigate it, and then we hopefully take them through to prosecution.
Really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor McRae, have you still got your third question?
Yeah, of course I have. It's my last one as well. Right. The report states that gun crime has increased by 14.1%. So what is the increase in firearms offences attributed, and how does the increase in firearms offences relate to knife crime?
Because we've been catching them. Can I pass that across?
Yeah, I mean, this is like you've heard me say before, for those of you who've been around a while, it's close to my heart is this. We've recorded a good number of those offences by our proactivity. We've never seized so many firearms. I mean, in terms of some of the sentencing as well, some of the jobs that have just recently concluded at the Crown Court, I can't say anything in terms of sentencing because they're in October, but I would anticipate that there will be some significant outcomes, let's just say. We continue to respond to the local intelligence, and we also work with national partners. As soon as we get a sniff around particularly a conventional firearm, we are all over it with a large number of resources. And as you can see from, I know some of you said to me about the programme interceptors, predominantly the first point of call is the armed response vehicles, and they're very successful at responding and mitigating those threats.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I do watch interceptors. It's quite often in Stapleford as well, actually. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Smith and then Councillor Edwards. Thank you.
Yeah, this is my last question there as well. It's around the new scooters, e-scooters and things like that. I know there's a trial going off in the city. But my problem that we're getting in Hucknall is particularly a bad problem. I know Inspector Dixon's been put it as one of the priorities for the Hucknall area. But I was just wondering if there's any more that we can do to publicise that you can't use these scooters in particular. And I think Hucknall's having a bigger problem because it's next to the city and they see people using them in the city, so they think it's okay. But they're buying ones that are unregulated. The ones in the city, I believe, have been restricted, so they can't go over a certain speed. These ones haven't. So I had quite a few calls this week, about, especially in Hucknall, about people being nearly knocked over and all sorts of stuff. So it's getting to be a massive problem. And I'm assuming it's not just Hucknall where the problem is, but it's the other outskirts of the city. But I don't know what we can do about that.
I've actually been speaking with the police comms team, and there's going to be a whole programme, isn't there? We're going to do a whole. It's going to be led by the police comms team, an education programme about what you are legally allowed to do, and I just encourage everybody to share that, because we need to prevent people getting themselves in bother.
I was just going to say, you're spot on. Obviously, city, you can ride the yellow ones. It's a local initiative. There's mixed views. They are permitted at the moment. We have policed particularly one incident where somebody was quite seriously injured. And I think you're right about the sort of the purchase, the online, and then the conversion of them. And we have been seizing some as well. So the media campaign will go out, but we're fully behind it, let's say, but respectful of the fact that, in the city, there is a trial and, we're a local partner, and that's been a democratically sorted process. And obviously we're trying to support all avenues, let's say.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Smith?
Very briefly, just to ask that when you do sort out your comms programme, if you can pass it on to our comms officer at the district councils as well, and we can feed it out through our systems there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On e-scooters and wind scooters, I do understand how the wind scooters that we have, the yellow ones, are allowed to be used in the city centre, sorry. And actually, probably the only form of transport I know of whereby someone who hires that vehicle is known and their location as they use that vehicle is known. There's more sort of knowledge of what someone's doing with that vehicle than any other form of transport I know. And so this is something quite radical. And if you've noticed at all, it's incredibly popular with young people. Now, what happened when the motor car first came along? I mean, I know the stories, you'll know it, won't you, about people who had them, allowed them, but somebody had to walk in front with them with a red flag. The stories of the town in Cornwall where their first motor accidents was between the only two cars there were in that town in Cornwall. You know, what we are suffering most from is aggression from people who drive motor cars. And that aggression is very noticeable in that people who cycle, as well as the wind scooter users, are very reluctant to use the road. And they're using the pavements far too much as a result. Now, we are doing something radical here. We are the radical city on this. We were the first to do bus lanes. We were the first to do the charge cards. We were the first to say the commuter should pay for public transport rather than the taxpayer, the council taxpayer. Time and again, we have been innovators and pioneers. And yes, this is an experiment. But if we turn around and start saying, well, it's a massive problem, without actually judging what really needs to be done, which is we need to be moderating the behavior of aggressive car drivers. And what I can tell you is that people who use the wind scooters are suffering verbal abuse. I didn't know whether to raise it under hate crime or some other category. I was going to seek your advice on that. But there's a particular street, actually, we think if you want an exercise, we might even be able to suggest a street where it could be done. Because I wouldn't mind a little bit of trialing the response to bad behavior from motorists in response to e-scooters, as well as the experiment in itself. And I hope you'll listen to that when the suggestion comes forward. But do understand, this is something that is very popular with young people. And how often do we say in meetings like this? Well, of course, no one speaks for young people because they don't go to public meetings and they don't join politics like we join politics. So let's please bear that in mind. I wanted to ask about guns. I know you'll have learned the lessons already from Plymouth. I just couldn't find it in the report, but I think that's because I can't do search on the software. It's in there somewhere, I'm sure. But I mean, the surprise for me is that someone is allowed, like that, is allowed to have a weapon that can kill 5 people in 5 minutes. And my question today is just how much of a burden is that on the police? The time you have to spend monitoring these people. Because I understand, you know, I've come from a village. I know how you use shotguns to manage wildlife and manage the countryside. I get that argument, but I don't understand why it's needed in Plymouth in a state like that. I don't actually know what the story is in terms of people having shotguns within the conurbation. So I'd appreciate some advice on that if you would. And then on the city centre stuff, I didn't know whether this came under alcohol or not, but I just think we need to up the game a bit in terms of a consistent, clear, coherent attitude to our approach to people who are on the doorsteps, on the shops fronts, begging, and what our reaction to that is. I think we've let that slip a little bit. I know it's a joint thing. I know it's not just police. I did actually use 101 to report an incident on this. Maybe I should have used 999. But it ended up with, there was a fight in a restaurant. So there's these restaurants starting to open up, and we're all saying how important it is that the restaurants get business. And then there's a fight between 2 people who were clearly dependents having a fight, and it involving the restaurant. And I'm pretty clear the restaurant didn't report it. What I would say about 101 is I got through fairly quickly, I think, or I think I might go a bit for that waiting for press 6 or whatever it was. But hey, it takes you 12 minutes to get all the information you want in. And really, all I was trying to do was get a warden down there or a uniformed officer down there to actually sort of move these people on or take on whatever action was actually needed. And I just wonder if that was what you would have wanted from a 101 response. By all means, I can tell it was 9 o'clock on a Saturday. I just can't remember which Saturday. If you want to look it up, I'll give you my home number and you can check out whether I did it right or not. But the gist of it is, that sense of actually I had a situation where I was trying to get people to respond, and I thought 101 in this instance because it didn't feel quite serious. And well, okay, I thought I might get that, and let's shake of my head. So I should have done 999. But I just think we've lost that sense of the standard we had, and I think we need to get back to it, because it is one of the post-COVID responses that we've got to get. Finally, I'd just like to say, I'm sure everybody would say, is that I know our police have been put at risk by having to put on extra, well, to do all the duties they've had to do during COVID, and the public policy has been to vaccinate by age rather than by service. And, you know, I'm sure those arguments are all understood and all that sort of stuff, but I know there's a member of staff in the Meadows who's suffering from long COVID. I'm sure it won't be unique. So thank you to those in the service who have put themselves at risk in doing what we need them to do, and thanks for that.
If I just pick up on the gun license thing first, because it was tragic what happened in Plymouth, and the chief and I have meetings every week, and we had a really robust conversation about how can I be confident that we have really robust strategies in place with our gun licensing in Nottinghamshire. So there's very, very little chance of that happening. And I was really reassured that actually the policy that the chief has in place at the moment is above and beyond what is expected. Already, you're making sure that the GPs are getting involved. I'd like you to speak a little bit more about that, if that's okay. And if you could also pick up the joint strategy we have to make sure that our city is welcoming, but also if we do have people who are begging, what the strategy should be around that. It is a joint strategy, but actually advice to Councillor Edwards is if he was seeing a fight about to take place or happening, should it have been a 101 or should it have been a 999? Thank you.
So yeah, firearms licensing. In answer to your question, it costs us to administer that pursuit by people. We have about anywhere between 10 and 12,000 licence holders across our county and city, and the process involves a number of staff who go out and inspect and renew licences. We review things dynamically in response to information that we get from members of the public, if somebody's involved in an incident, and also information from GPs. But the licensing process itself, we actually, if there is a flag from a GP or if an individual notes any kind of concern on the mental health side that we have, we require the individual to provide the information to us. So they can't get past that level unless they're not going to get a certificate unless we're satisfied with the information that they provide. So, and we've adopted that probably about 3.5 years ago. And, you know, within that system, I think definitely the cost of doing it is definitely met by the police, and isn't really met by the shooting fraternity. But what I want to underline is, you know, the majority of licence holders are perfectly law-abiding, good sports people, some of which do it for animal destruction and management in the countryside, some of which do it for a sport. Absolutely fine. But after the incident, we seize weapons off people on a regular basis, and you know, we have a system in place whereby 24 hours a day, if we have a concern and it gets reported through, we can have a response, and that's the way that we've operated for a good while. Your two beggars stroke, you know, itinerants, let's say, if they're fighting, it's 999 every time, and we'll be there because that's what we need to be doing. But with regards to the general sort of approach, yeah, I've got a conciliatory approach with regards to begging. We'll definitely have a respectful relationship with those people because most are very vulnerable. But the repetitive individuals who thieve and who actively take drugs and deal drugs, then obviously together we target them, and that's what we've continued to do throughout the pandemic, really, with the City Council. And just assure you that nothing's changed on that side of things.
Thank you very much. Just a quick comment from me if there are no further questions. Commissioner, at the start of this discussion, you mentioned about the review that you're undertaking, and it's really just to inform members and also to thank you that we're going to be included and meeting with, I think, a young lady who's undertaking the research on your behalf. And I think it's the intention from the office to send something around to colleagues to say, give you sort of a flavour of the sort of questionings that are there, and just get some soundings from yourself. I think we've got time to do that, haven't we, over the next couple of weeks? Because I know you're on a tight time scale to get that result in. So thank you for that. Thank you for the report. There are two general recommendations. Are people content to approve those? Thank you. That takes us then to item 8, the Complaints and Review Assurance Report, pages 85 to 94 in your bundle.
Thank you, Chair. For those that don't know me, I'm Kevin Dennis, Chief Executive for the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office. Commissioner Henry has asked me to kind of introduce this report, and I think it stems from the panel's interest in some legislation, new legislation that was introduced in February of last year that passed responsibility for undertaking reviews of complaints from the police, from the head of professional standards, in fact, to the Police and Crime Commissioner, and that was a national development. But the report also focuses on how we undertake our oversight role in terms of complaints. We regular dip sample complaints. The report focuses this time. We took a thematic response, and we looked at the use of force complaints, and we also looked to see whether there's any kind of complaints around dog biting. Those two things tend to be a focus of some of the complaints that the force receive. So the first part of the report is around the dip sampling and the findings, and we have kind of regular meetings with the head of professional standards to feedback any learning from those dip sampling, and we also feed them back into the force's governance structures and through to the audit and scrutiny panel. So this is the kind of, I suppose, the fourth meeting where there is some kind of oversight of the kind of complaints process. But I think the bit that probably you were most interested is how well is the new legislation going, and how is the Commissioner discharging the responsibilities. So section 4.8 of the report focuses on reviews. That's the technical word that the Independent Office for Police Complaints use. They don't use the word appeals, they talk about reviews. So essentially this is the first year, so up until, so this report is quite old in terms of the data, but for the first year, we had, this report focuses on 39 reviews that are undertaken into complaints. Appendix A describes the process. So if people aren't happy with the outcome of the investigation to the complaint, when they receive the outcome letter from the police, they've then got 28 days to ask for a review to be completed by the Commissioner. And we've got dedicated staff. We've had to take on some additional resource in the office, and we've also got an external contract with a company called Sancus, who were employed nationally to roll out the new complaint system. So we've got a lot of experience, because one of the things we didn't want to do is delve straight into appointing our own independent adjudicator without understanding what the demand might be in the first year. In relation to those 39 reviews in the first year, 9 of those complaints were upheld. And then we make specific recommendations, and we make those to the Chief Constable, and we can make a recommendation and ask for the complaint to be reinvestigated. And we rehearse those with the head of professional standards, because obviously, and to date, we've never had any disagreement about differences of approaches there. There's always that potential. I won't rule it out in the future, but it's certainly, to date, that way of working seems to be proving dividend before we write back to the complainant. So example, Appendix B gives you a couple of examples where we've made specific recommendations about individual cases, and you'll forgive me if I don't talk about individual cases. I want to just talk about the generality. And Appendix B is a report that the guy that we employed through Sancus has just written about the experience. And I suppose our first observation during the first year is that around the outcome letters that the force were producing could be improved a little bit in relation to clarity and structure, in terms of so we can communicate better to the complainant. So we do that on a regular basis. We feed back to people. just to give you a flavour of what the figures look like at the moment, it took quite a while for this new legislation to sink through and people get used to the idea. If you want to review, you don't apply to the force anymore. You come through to the Commissioner's office. And the first review, we didn't get asked, despite the legislation coming in February, wasn't until the 23rd of May. At the moment, they stand at 112, and we've got about 15 that are outstanding to be done. We get through about, when we do employ somebody to look at the reviews, we do about 5 or 6 a day. Compared to our colleagues in other places, that's very efficient. So I just say the learning from these reviews also gets played into audit and scrutiny. And also we ask the head of professional standards to report on the complaint system twice a year as well. So I think there's pretty good oversight. Whether we ever get to the point of employing a full-time individual, the evidence suggests so far we're managing the need and the demand as it comes through, as it is at the moment. So I'll stop there, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Keith. I mean, this is a very early assessment of process, is what you're really saying, isn't it? The learning is early, but we'll see if there are any questions from colleagues. Leslie Dolby, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a few questions. Firstly, the difference of 21 days in resolving complaints. If resolved other than by investigation, it takes an average of 56 days. If resolved by investigation, this takes an average of 35 days. This seems at odds because I would have expected resolution by investigation to have taken longer. So I don't know if there's an explanation for this. And secondly, are there any performance standards for dealing with complaints, timescales? And thirdly, this is really a question for the Chief, really, I suppose, is concerning the morale of police officers. If a complaint is not upheld, what happens from an HR perspective, you know, in dealing with that police officer? Is the case kept on file, for example? So.
We're privileged because the Chief is also the national lead on the complaint system. So he's probably one of the founding architects of the new system. But in terms of what happens to officers where there isn't any kind of action, there is a new process around performance requiring improvement, practice requiring improvement. The whole focus of the new system is about learning, not just about punishment. And the Chief want to make a few comments. Like you, we made some observations. It seems to be counterintuitive that if you're dealing with something outside of a formal process, that should be a lot quicker because it's about problem solving, getting to the issues quickly. And also, we'd like to see more of that. We'd like to see more rather than formal investigation. So again, a Chief might want to comment on that. But in terms of the performance indicators, in the performance pack on page 68, the average number of days being taken to, particularly investigations, was well over 100 days at one point. So our dip sampling actually showed it's actually quicker than what was generally happening. It's now down to 73 days. So things are getting better. Everybody would like things to be resolved a lot quicker, particularly if you've got an officer that's potentially suspended and off work while those investigation and inquiries are being made. But Chief, I don't know whether you wanted to add into that.
Oh, it's come back on. Yeah, good questions. Systems changed, and it's really around trying to expedite the responses, as Kevin's just said. We've got much quicker at resolving the complaints. The ones that are dealt with outside the system are quite often expressions of dissatisfaction with, let's say, an organisational policy or something that's happened in a particular department, a change of process, etc. They tend to take longer, and they are, let's say, less personally impactful, and from my perspective, important than somebody who is saying, look, I've had a use of force against me and it was disproportionate. And that's why those types of ones are dealt with much quicker. The other thing on average is that with a lot of the complaints, they're dealt with in-house, but there's some that by mandation, by law, have to be reported through to the IOPC, and we have no control whatsoever over their timeliness. So some of those things can go on and on and on. And that does have, on occasions, an impact on the officers. There's hardly anybody that is suspended. We restrict some people where necessary, but we hardly ever suspend because we're paying them and we can get some work out of them. and that's the right thing to do, as you'd expect as local taxpayers. But I think the fundamental point is the changes to the system try to push the learning at the front end and restrict the big investigations to those who we need to focus on, who have seriously let themselves, the organisation and the public down.
Sorry, may I come back at that, Chair? I'm just thinking, I should imagine there's a proportion of vexatious complaints, and I'm concerned about those police officers that may get caught.
There are, but do you know, to be candid with you, people have complained about me all the way through my career. They're entitled to, you know, and it sort of comes with the territory, that does. And I want to work in a system where people can, because I'm prepared to defend my actions, and sort of police by my values. And most of the cops and most of the staff will exactly say that to you. But sometimes things can go on a little long. So you asked a question about where's it all logged on the HR. It's just one central system for all the complaints. So we can see trends over time. So if an officer, ends up with half a dozen in a short space of time, there's an intervention, and that's the type of performance things that just kick in. And that's a conversation with line management, professional standards, etc.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, there's a lot of interest in this topic. I've got Councillor Camilleri, Councillor Lee and Councillor Inglis.
Yes, complaints are very serious, obviously. And I've often noticed, not saying this applies to police, they'll give you the number of complaints, but you won't give us what kind of complaints. Is there any commonality within the types of complaints here? Are they, I don't know, lateness of dealing with something or violence against? Because that's what we're not seeing. We're seeing the number of complaints, but I'd like to know what complaints do you get most of?
Yeah, that's public data. There's a breakdown nationally. It's run on a national basis. We report through to the Home Office and the IOPC. There's an annual sort of massive pack that breaks that down. And on a local basis, we do as well. The most common types of complaint on a local basis, really, I would say the top three are: one, use of force, i.e. not really happy about being arrested. Two, the timeliness of some investigations. Some of that's down to the cops, some of that's down to the wider system. And on occasions, three, linked to those two things are what we call incivility, which often comes from an arrest encounter, let's say. They're the top three, really. You get very few with regards to sort of corruption or anything like that. That's mainly reported to us by our own staff. And then we have a dedicated small unit that undertake those investigations. So the majority are from normal daily business of the arrest type process or the crime investigation process.
Thank you. Councillor Lee, thank you.
So, can I just add, it is publicly available, so if we can share the link with you to distribute, if you'd like to see more detail on that, we want to be transparent with it all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. As a councillor, I also get complaints. What I want to ask is, I'm sure you do, but I'd just like to get on record, is what support you put in place for your officers, even if they have made a mistake, even if they are in the wrong. What are you making sure mental health and they're being looked after? Because nobody wants to see anybody commit suicide or struggling that way.
We do have wellbeing champions, and actually looking after our staff and both the police staff and the serving police officers, it's absolutely crucial. But for more detail, I'll pass over.
Yeah, so on that side of things, Police Federation and staff associations, so Unison, GMB, have dedicated representatives in the workforce, and I work closely with them locally, but also on a national basis. So if somebody does receive a complaint, they get full support and wraparound from the Police Federation, sometimes from the Superintendents Association, and if it's a chief constable, they normally ring me from a different force. So that's the way that the system works. It's really good from that type of thing. It works really well for the officer, but I say again, I want to work in an area where I am held to account and I'm prepared to explain my decisions based on my values.
Councillor Inglis, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it leads on from Jono's question, really. We've heard about the demand on officers, the complaints on officers, the workload for the officers. And I know you've been going around stations and talking to officers. Is there any sort of formal process you're looking at for like a review of officer satisfaction within the job to morale and workloads?
There's a regular staff survey. It actually came out. It was last quarter, wasn't it? Where it was actually increasing, which I was delighted to see. So as well as, yes, we're all having conversations and listening as we're going out and about, we do a formal process of the staff survey to check the people are doing okay.
So nationally, it's the University of Durham. It's a professor up there that does it for about 23 police forces. We have, I think it's the highest level of participation and one of the highest levels of sort of satisfaction with lot type of thing. And also with that notion of public service. And strategically, that's what I push all the time. So through COVID, yes, you know, lots of people have been jabbed, let's say. The attendance is the highest it's ever been. And the workforce are fully on board. And it's a bigger workforce now with getting behind what we need to do on behalf of the public. So at the moment, despite all the national noise, on a local basis, attendance is good, numbers are increasing, and actually morale is really quite good, particularly with all the reacher and the increase in the numbers. It's really gone down well, and the support to the staff in the kit and equipment, you know, I've seen big differences in the last 4 or 5 years, and that's probably also linked to, you know, the highest levels of crime reduction compared to every other police force, and less total crime than Leicestershire last year, would you believe?
We're all coming to Nottinghamshire across the border. No, I think that's a fair comment, Chief, and it is noticeable the morale is improving. And perhaps just on a final note, with cohabitating areas, perhaps the Commission would like to do a fund for each one for the officer's benefit, because I know teaspoons have got a life expectancy of 2 days, forks have got an expectancy of 2 hours, and mugs have got a life expectancy of about 6 days. So if you could have a continued fund for that, please, I'd appreciate it.
I think on that note, thank you. I should just put the recommendation was to note the learning identified. And I think, as I said at the beginning, this is early days, so it'll be interesting to see how that develops over time. So thank you for that. That takes us on to our final report. I don't intend to bore people with this. First of all, it's absolutely important that I thank those colleagues who contributed things into the draft report. Particular thanks to a number of people who are employed by the council here locally, democratic officers you see before you, who've had a huge input into putting this together, particularly Joe, and also to the graphics team. What you do have is just a couple of days. If there's something that you find that is not correct or that you feel should be reworded, please drop an email quickly to Joe, because it's about ready to go to the printers. I think that's all I need to say, isn't it, Joe? Tell me if I've missed anything out.
Can you just bring Keith in on the looking forward bit?
Okay. Right. So Keith is going to do the looking forward. I'll hand over to Keith.
Thanks, Chair. It was just a minor point, really, that where it talks about the PCC review, part 2 of the review. We've just had an email in this afternoon from the Local Government Association. It is marked official sensitive, so I can't go into the finer details of it, but it was just to say that panel's views are being sought as part 2 of the review. Particularly, there's a section about the role of panels, and some of that includes memberships and things such as independent members and everything. So the plan is, it has literally just come in this afternoon. So if me and Joe get our heads together and draft something and run it past Chair and Vice Chair, and then we'll put it past the members for views as well, with a view to trying to meet the deadline of the 20th of September. Thank you very much.
I just want to say I'm just on scrounge actually. On the 25th of September, I'm doing a sponsored bike ride to raise some money for Broxtowe Youth Homelessness, because they're a brilliant group. They do. It's not just Broxtowe. They go all over. I know they go to Rushcliffe, Derby, everywhere. So if anyone wants to get the bike out, and I'd definitely recommend an electric bike to the Commissioner. That's the video we need you all to see. But if anyone wants to join in, get in touch. And if anyone wants to make a donation to help us raise money for them, then again, get in touch as well. So I just thought I'd hijack the meeting with that bit.
Thank you. I hadn't asked about for an AOB. Thank you. You'll notice it's not on the agenda. So you didn't cross my hand with silver for that one. So you'll pay later. You'll pay later. On that note, thank you very much everyone for your attendance, and I duly declare the meeting closed. Thank you everyone.